Good day to everyone joining us and welcome to today's X-Talks webinar. Today's talk is entitled Drug Delivery Evaluating Off-the-Shelf and Novel Drug Delivery Solutions. My name is Sarah Hand and I'll be your X-Talks host for today. Today's webinar will run for approximately 60 minutes and this presentation includes a Q&A session with our speakers. This webinar is designed to be interactive and webinars work best when you're involved. So please feel free to submit questions and comments for our speakers throughout the presentation using the questions chat box. And we'll try to attend to your questions during the Q&A session. This chat box is located in the control panel on the right-hand side of your screen. If you require any assistance, please contact me at any time by sending a message using this chat panel. At this time, all participants are in listen-only mode, and please note that this event will be recorded and made available for streaming on xtalks.com. At this point, I'd like to thank Veranex, who developed the content for this presentation. With a fully integrated concept to commercialization solution, Veranex's design and engineering expertise sets them apart, providing you with visibility to development feasibility and opportunity along the way. Their expertise improves your launch readiness and expedites the development of your technology for regulatory and commercial success. They're ISO 13485 certified and FDA registered for medical technology product development. And with more than 30 years of experience and a global reach into emerging markets, their design and engineering specialization will make your medtech vision a reality. And now I'd like to introduce our moderator for today's event. Brandon Bogdalek has worked with dozens of medical device, drug delivery, diagnostics, and digital health companies on outsourced innovation and commercialization products. In his current position, he represents the product development and engineering function from a marketing lens, helping tell stories from internal and external subject matter experts that provide value and promote new thinking. He holds a bachelor's degree in biology from the University of Minnesota. So without further ado, I'll hand the mic over to Brandon to introduce today's panelists.
Thank you, Sarah. Really appreciate the introduction, and thank you all for taking a little bit of time out of your busy days to join us in this conversation. We have a great lineup of panelists, and I see as folks are rolling in here too, please feel free to use the chat function throughout today's webinar and ask us questions. This is supposed to be a conversational discussion today, and this is all about helping you guys and providing value. So again, just very excited to be here. To get things kicked off, I'd like to introduce Michelle Howard-Sparks. She's a pharmaceutical executive with 24 years of experience in global R&D leadership, spanning preclinical development through commercial and technical operations under both virtual and non-virtual business models. She has over 10 years of combination product development experience using both off-the-shelf and innovative solutions. She has proven success in the development of 5 commercial products, serving on the launch team of 2 commercial products. Michelle currently provides leadership for combination product and preclinical development at EyePoint Pharmaceuticals. We can go to the next slide. So next, I would like to introduce Valerie Fenster. Since 2002, she has been leading the development of a Keros human factors team and expertise to support all elements and aspects of human factors engineering, user-centered design, and industrial design activities. She has 30+ years experience as a persuasive advocate for implementing human factors engineering and human computer interface best practices. Valerie is responsible for planning and executing design, research, and documentation activities to ensure successful global regulatory health agency submissions for combination product development programs. And last but not least, we have Dustin Gaitis. He is an experienced in medical and consumer healthcare product development from an initial concept design through testing and validation to clinical builds and transfer to manufacturing. He has experience in drug delivery combination product development with high volume disposables, complex low volume disposables, electromechanical devices, and capital equipment. Dustin has 15 years of product development experience and is exceptionally passionate about medical product development. He's also a colleague of mine here at Veranex, and we are very excited to have him here at the panel. So to go ahead and get things started today, I think we are going to start with a poll. Major part of the conversation today, guys, is really helping and aiding in the discussion around an off-the-shelf drug delivery solution versus developing a novel platform. And so to get things started today, we really want to understand, where do you guys want us to focus this conversation today? Obviously, you're here because you think both might be valuable, but if there's one over the other that you want us to talk about, this is a great time for us to hear that. And we'll make sure that during the conversation today and the panel questions that we address those as best we can. So with that said, I'll give you guys, maybe 30-ish seconds here to go ahead and answer these questions, or choose a question, excuse me, and then we'll go ahead and get started with the panel. All right, Sarah, I think we've probably given the group enough time. Okay. So it looks like we are looking at an equal mix of both, which is great. And then maybe trending even a little bit more towards the novel drug delivery side, which is awesome, because I think the group here today has really great experience with both, but we certainly have some novel drug delivery experts here today. So we can go ahead and close the poll, and we will get started with our first question. So I know I gave a brief introduction on each of the panelists in kind of a resume format, but I do want the panelists just to take a couple minutes to introduce themselves, and specifically their background into the drug delivery industry. I think that's really important. So to go ahead and get it started, we'll start with Valerie.
Alrighty, thank you. I have sort of a strange way I got into medical devices. I actually started out in banking. I worked for a very large global bank, and I was brought in to work on their ATM machines, their online banking services, and so forth. So we're talking even before there was the internet. And so I spent a lot of time doing interface design, which I think these days is the same as user experience. And my role was prototyping and tools. So I did a lot of work prototyping applications. What would the ATM screens look like? And I worked a lot with our research department, testing that with users. And I was extremely interested in that. I later started my own company, left the bank because they were moving all of us from New York to Chicago. And I said, I'm not going any place colder than New York. And I had my own company for about 11 years, doing a lot of interaction and design, interface design with other banking companies, brokerage accounts, and so forth. And one day I was visiting a friend in a hospital, and I said, who does all this stuff? These medical devices, these machines, and so forth. And I decided to look into that, and I wound up with St. Jude Medical, which is now Abbott. And St. Jude hired me because of my touchscreen experience that I had at the bank. So around, I'd say 2008 is when I got into medical devices. I also had a lot of IVR experience, interactive voice recognition, website experience, and so forth from my previous work. So I did a lot of their applications for their therapeutic devices, their pacemakers, their heart rhythm management tools, and so forth. And then I was there for about 6 years, and I started working at Amgen, which is where I got into combination products. And to me, that was really interesting and exciting, because with pure medical devices that surgeons use and so forth, you're creating something for very highly skilled professionals. But with combination products, this is for the layperson. This is for grandma who's got to inject herself with a rheumatoid or that kind of medication, or it's a very different audience. And I stayed with that. I stayed with combination products. I was with them for 6 or 7 years later, and I started their human factors group. I later went to a consultancy, started their human factors group, and now I'm with Acaro, starting their human factors group. And I'm the only HF person there right now. Hopefully we'll build up to a larger group, but that's kind of been my path, a very strange path getting to medical devices. But I do enjoy this area because it's creating something that's got to be safe and effective per the FDA, and it's handled by novice users, they're very interesting people, with diseases. So that puts another layer on top of that.
Awesome. What a great background. And I've had the opportunity to work with you, Valerie, on a few different occasions. And it's awesome just having you on the panel and having the audience learn from your background. So thank you. Michelle, why don't you kick us off next?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the X Talks. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for the invitation to speak and to be among the panelists that you have here. So my background, I have a PhD in medicinal chemistry from University of Kentucky. And I started off in drug delivery systems in my PhD program. Medicinal chemistry is not one that you typically think of with related to drug delivery, but my graduate school research was funded by a company called Control Delivery Systems. And we were looking at devices to be implanted in the back of the eye. And so after 24 years or 20 years of being in the business, I came back to what used to be Control Delivery Systems in my current job at EyePoint Pharmaceuticals. I really looked at intraocular implants for the first 6 years of my career. I went on then to just go into regular oral drug delivery, mainly in pain management. Spent a long time at the beginning of my career in standard oral meds. Towards the end of that career at Endo, I started getting into epidural microspheres and sublingual formulations, transdermal patches, kind of alternative ways of getting drugs to where you needed them to go to maximize their efficacy and minimize their safety profile. Went from there to Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, PDP. I wanted to get a little bit more global experience and started looking at vaginal dosage forms, which was, they were targeting HIV prevention in discordant couples. And that was an amazing experience where I got to learn a lot about global regulations and how get how a lot of government agencies work together to get some of these hard to access areas, some of the vital drugs that they need. Very cool experience, was very short-lived. I went on then to work for Takeda. And it was about 2014 after I left Takeda and joined a very small biotech company called Zafgen. I was actually employee number 7 there. We had a very complicated lyophilized suspension for subcutaneous injection that was all processed through aseptic processes. There was no terminal sterilization. And we had to look at how we were going to get this drug into the body the way that we wanted it to. We started off with vial to vial. We then went to pre-filled and vial, and then ultimately with the idea in mind that this would be an auto-injector device. The indication that we were looking at was Prader-Willi syndrome. So these kids that we were going to be getting our therapeutics would they might have the ability to dose themselves. More often than not, they were dosed by a caregiver. They had some developmental issues, and so that made the user interface quite challenging and also exciting to learn about from a user perspective. And finally, I've ended up back here at EyePoint again. Like I said, come full circle in my career and back into the back of the eye, treating retinal diseases. And so we are developing, or we've had on the market, a product that we just recently sold to Alameda. It's YUTIQ. It was a 3-year implant that was injected into the back of the eye to help with chronic uveitis. And we are now exploring a multitude of other ocular diseases with biodegradable formulations that are injected into the back of the eye with innovative injectors.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Michelle, for the great background. Really happy to have you here. So thank you. Dustin, last but not least.
Yeah, thanks a lot. So Dustin Gaitis, my background is mechanical and product development engineering. You kind of asked what my journey was, so I'll give it too. So it all stems back from high school. So we'll go way back. I come from Michigan, where they breed engineers in chemistry. I first started off in AutoCAD in high school, and I thought, wow, I can actually work on computers and develop cool things. This is amazing. So I knew right away that's exactly what I wanted to do. That's what I wanted to go to school for, and that's what I wanted to do for my job. Coming out of high school, I went into college. I actually did an interesting course that was around product development engineering. So it's mechanical and product development, really just geared towards product development. And that's really all I wanted to do. Coming out of that, I started work in product development consultancy. So I got a taste for kind of fast pace and wide variety of programs. And I always knew I wanted to do medical. At the time, I searched for, medical product development consultancies. And as you know, there aren't a lot, right? And there weren't a lot quite a few years ago. So that led me to Dymedica, and where we are today, which is now Veranex. So how did I get into drug delivery? We get a lot of drug delivery programs here, and I've always gravitated and lobbied for working on those, and just more and more being experienced, kind of getting my foot in the door and making sure that I'm in front of those programs as they come in. And so product development and solving problems with medicine, that's a combination product. That's why we're here, right? So that's what I'm excited about.
Awesome. Yeah, it's been great to get to know you and learn from you and your experiences on a number of these projects. So really glad to have you here as well. So we'll jump into the subject matter expertise. I know that's what everybody is here for, and I'll kick us off with a question that's really geared around the core of the conversation today, which is this notion of looking at off-the-shelf solutions and platform organizations and comparing that to novel drug delivery design and development, right? And as you all three have had some level of experience, this is a nuanced decision, right? That comes with a lot of different elements, some great, some not so great. And so, the question that I would pose to you guys are, what are some of the top factors that you consider when making this decision? Is it one or the other? Is there a middle ground? Just help us understand some of those top things that you're thinking about when you're bringing a new solution to market. And maybe we'll go in reverse order this time. Dustin, we'll start with you.
Yeah, thanks. So, what are the things that we're weighing and kind of what are some of the decisions that help make that off the shelf versus novel? And a lot of this, we do early on exercises with clients that are really around, I'll say, business drivers, like what are the business drivers? And then kind of what is your multi-generational plan? So first off, obviously, what are your user needs, right? And what are your technical requirements? Based off your user needs and technical requirements, is there an off-the-shelf solution, that meets your needs, your indications? Is there some off-the-shelf that meets your technical requirements? And a lot of times there is. However, there may be some caveats there to some usability or tweaks or things that you may need to do to incorporate whatever that off-the-shelf is. And another thing kind of within those business drivers is they've got user needs, technical requirements, time to market, right? So do you need to get your drug out, right away? Is that what you're trying to do? And your new delivery method, or are you going to take a little bit more systematic approach to make sure that you're ticking off your user needs and your requirements to then make that decision if you're going to do novel? And then obviously cost, right? So it's kind of counter to say user needs and cost and what you're trying to balance there. But, at the end of the day, there's costs associated with development. There's costs associated with the regulatory and technical risk and developing a new product, combination product, right? So, you really need to weigh those factors and what you want to do to be the most impactful. And so you kind of like, is there a middle ground? And I think, I think there's plans, for example, to do something multi-generational where you come out on the market with something that's proven It's quick, it gets you there, and then maybe in parallel development plan, you develop something that is a market differentiator, something to kind of set you apart, and customize to maybe some of the things that off the shelf is maybe hindering you, for example. So
Awesome.
I guess that's in a nutshell that, yeah.
Yeah. Michelle, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I would straight to the heart of the matter there with cost. Was going to be one of my, first key issues with innovation. So, innovation is expensive and it's time consuming, and you really kind of need to have a roadmap to where you want to be before you even start. It is, that careful timing between preclinical to phase 1, what you can get away with before you get into phase 2 versus phase 3, and then on to the market. Getting your design lock before you get into phase 3 to make sure that you are getting the appropriate population tested and getting the appropriate user experience potentially before even, completing those phase 3 trials. I think some of the nuances that we also see in that I've run across in my career is this idea of outsource or in-house capabilities. I have worked mainly in small biotech companies when I've been in the combination product arena, and very often I'm the only one that has the combination product experience. So you really have to start being able to educate the company as a N of one and building. And maybe Valerie can also speak to this as well, as she has been the N of one, it seems, in her career. And you really have to do your due diligence, getting back to those business needs and the user needs. One of the things I'm always considering is, what does the molecule need? And that goes to, what is your therapeutic area? What is the molecule that you're working with? And what is the intended route of delivery? Is there something that is off the shelf that you can use? That's a great place to start with your preclinical and your phase 1 studies. But if you have a unique area that no one is dosing to, right, innovation is going to be part of what drives your timeline and part of what drives your expense as you're making your budgets and trying to get your hands around what this development program is going to look over the long term. Due diligence is important whenever you're looking at outsourcing. I think a lot of folks, you don't have the in-house capabilities, and so you're really looking at, who are my CDMOs, who are my human factors experts, where can I get the engineering experience and expertise that I need. But really, more than anything, you usually start simple and build towards innovation as you gain success in your clinical trials. It's a double-edged sword. You don't want to start too late, getting your innovation started and getting it into, trials before you get into phase 3 design locks. But those are a few of the nuances that I've run across in my career. And I think a little bit, there's some to speak of with off-the-shelf options once you have a product on the market as well. So if you are, like most companies, trying to get something out the door as soon as possible, and the off-the-shelf option is the only way to go, say a vial to vial or a prefilled syringe to vial, and then you want to go to an auto-injector, you might launch with a vial to vial or a prefilled syringe and not have the innovation right off the bat, and that might be something that gets developed as a post-approval innovation once you have funds coming in.
Yeah, Michelle, Valerie, before we go to you, I just want to build on that and ask a follow-up. So this notion of vial to vial and going to market with that first and then following up with the innovation, do you feel that there's opportunity to parallel path that a little bit? Is there opportunity to get started on that new kind of novel platform while you're launching your existing product?
I would say it depends mostly on what the capacity and understanding is in-house. in your executive team, and or what are your capabilities with respect to regulatory know-how and quality management systems. But as you are, all of which need to be in place if you're going to go towards innovation. But yes, I think there is the opportunity. The other key aspect of that is your budget, right? What are you willing to spend early on versus later in development, and how does that fit into the overall development and approval program?
Awesome. No, great thoughts. Valerie, what are your thoughts on the question?
So I'm at that user level, always making it easy for the user. And from my perspective, to make the decision between an off-the-shelf versus a novel device, or an innovative device, this starts with patient or user research and doing a competitive landscaping. What's out there today? What are people using? Why or why not are they using certain devices to deliver the therapy? That's a very key step into determining which way to go. Now, if there's an off-the-shelf device that fits those needs, that's wonderful. Now, you may think it's wonderful, and as you start to go through your human factors work and you do your risk mitigation, you're doing your studies and you're watching the users use this device, you may find that you're not able to mitigate, you're not able to solve the problems that you're seeing. Devices come with inherent design flaws, inherent design inadequacies that cause missteps, confusions. As normal people, that's when I was saying the difference between a skilled professional versus who are using our devices in combination products. You've got anywhere from a healthcare provider down to a lay person, a caregiver, an elderly person, a child. So you've got a very different set of users using these devices. And I think you can launch as best as you can with perhaps the first device that you started. But if you're seeing these issues and you're seeing that something is difficult to overcome when users are using this device, number one, you've got to explain this to the FDA or other health authorities across the world. Why, hey, it's okay if they make the mistake. What's the risk associated with maybe not getting the therapy? Is this something where they could obtain a needle stick injury? What are the things that people are doing that potentially could cause harm to themselves? You've got to talk your way out of this with the agency. And sometimes the best thing to do is now to look at a device that could be an improvement upon what you currently have. I think the health authorities, the FDA understands when you've got a new type of therapy that you're developing, they're willing to give you some leeway there as long as they see you're improving, you're trying to change the design of the device, you're working on your instructions for use, your educational materials, and so forth. But then it will come to a point where if you just can't improve anymore, you need to look at a different way. Maybe it's a different off-the-shelf device, maybe it's modifying an off-the-shelf or going to a completely different solution. So the main thing, what the FDA says, is safe and effective use to deliver the therapy for the intended user population, et cetera, et cetera. We all know the mantra for human factors. And so to me, it's gathering those user needs, understanding where the potential use problems occur. Can you solve those use problems with the device that you have without creating a whole new device? And can you prove to the agency that you've done as much as you can to lower the risk as far as possible? And if you can't seem to do that, it's time to maybe start looking at a parallel path.
Yeah, no, that's a great perspective, and actually it builds very nicely into kind of our next line of thinking here, which is all around usability and design challenges for growth stage companies. So, I'm sure that there's several folks in the audience today, if not the entire audience, who is thinking about, novel drug delivery design and development and trying to get ahead of unintended consequences, right? And trying to be able to navigate around things, or at least have a heads up to some challenges that they might face in that space. And so, Dustin, maybe starting with you, What do you feel are some of the most common usability and design challenges that we see within this industry? And what would be maybe some of your recommendations to the folks in the audience that are embarking on that journey soon or are now, and you just kind of waving the red flag for them and saying, hey, watch out for these things. This is how you might avoid them. What are your thoughts? What would your recommendations be?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, when there's no industry precedence for what you're trying to work on, a lot of the things that Michelle was mentioning, when it's not conventional means that are IV, IM, SC, what are those? There's going to be technical hurdles associated with that, and how you prove that it's safe and effective, and then how do you prove that it's administering it in the way that you're claiming it to be, right? Whether that's a wearable or a specific manner or location, all while making the device easy to use, kind of going back to Valerie, right? Like, who will be administering this? Will it be worn? Will it be a trained physician, or will it be the patient? And then how does that change your design, your environment, how is that going to work? And then, how do you mitigate and avoid problems with that? So that's really, in developing a new novel drug, that can be time, and take a lot of effort there to prove that out. So that's kind of where I'm going with that. And then, how do you mitigate or improve that? And I think a lot of that is in working with the company that's developing that early on to work on, what is that drug going to be? Is it going to be multiple packets? Is it going to be one packet? Is it going to be various sizes? And that will also dictate, what that device may look like and how it's going to be used, if that makes sense.
Yeah, maybe a follow-up question to that, and you alluded to it a little bit, is around the end user, right? Is it a physician who is delivering to a patient, or is it a caregiver in the home who is delivering to a loved one, or even the situation of self-delivery, right? How do you feel those usability and design changes, do they change? Obviously they change between the user populations. Do you feel that there's more scrutiny and more need to get into the environment of use, really understand the user population for in-home delivery, or do you feel it's equally related in the health system or the hospital environment?
Yeah. Obviously, the more and more you can get this to the patient being the person that delivers this, the easier it's going to be. The more they can do it at home. They don't have to go and drive somewhere to do this. The more you can do that, the better. Obviously, though, when you open up that door, you're opening up, more usability things that you need to consider, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'll lean on Valerie a little bit. So I'd say iterate, and test, right? So the more and more human factors are involved, we see it all the time. It's a common thing where engineers will go and be developing and develop, and then it's always kind of an afterthought. Oh, we'll do a usability design, and then here you are pretty far down the line, and you realize you actually have quite a few user issues, right? And so my words of wisdom and advice is iterate, and bring in human factors to help with that, right? Get testing, even internal heuristics, right, can go a long way on things.
Awesome. Michelle, how about you? What are your thoughts as far as your experiences go?
Yeah, I'd say one of the probably number one issues with usability and design challenges is probably making sure that you have alignment with the regulatory authorities, right? Making sure you have those conversations with regulatory authorities, because they'll have their opinions on what your essential performance requirements are sooner than you might expect, and sooner than you might even be planning for. So the sooner that you can start those conversations with the FDA and get clear alignment there, very important. Also, a lot of this depends on the complexity of what you're wanting to design. If it's off the shelf, are you looking at combination product? Are you looking at 510K? Are you looking for, what are the requirements around the design, right? How complex is your design? Are you using electronics? Is there any smart interface? Anything that you're going to be interfacing with health apps? And I think to Valerie's point, even, understanding what is the risk if there is a user failure. What is the risk to your patient? Is it going to be something that's, life-threatening, or is it something that, oh, we can make up for it with another dose, with something else? Is there another standard of care? What are the tools in your user's toolbox to be able to recover from a missed dose? And then I think more or less having unified language across the organization, right? Making sure that you're speaking the same language as your regulatory affairs, your quality, that you got to have good systems in place to support those usability studies and the conclusions that you're going to get out of them, because defining those risks early on and having the tools to support all that will be vital to then, redesigning if you need to based on your failure modes.
Awesome. Thank you. Valerie, what are your thoughts?
I think, so if you're going to use an off-the-shelf solution, there are places that you can go to find out what risks currently exist in the industry. There's the FDA has the MAUDE database, they have the FAERS database. You can search those databases and look up for a particular therapeutic area or a particular device. What are the reported adverse events that have come? I know, for instance, with auto injectors, they're very, push button auto injectors, they're very well known for the user turning it upside down, slamming it down on their thigh and injecting into their thumb, things like that. Those things are well known and they're documented by the FDA. So if you're going to choose something off the shelf, perhaps you can work with the device manufacturer to figure out a way to, obviate that. Can we do something to the device that prevents that from occurring, using sound, electronics, lights, things like that, markings on the device. So, and that comes into understanding your user needs as well. Like what, are you working with a specific novel user population that may have diabetic neuropathy and they can't feel things from in their hands, or they've had a stroke, they've got short-term memory loss? Is there a device that's off the shelf that reminds them or talks to them about what the next step is to do and things like that? So I don't know if I'm getting off track there, but just thinking about usability issues in devices, and you might find that you wind up migrating yourself to something that's more novel, or taking something that exists and modifying it to fit your user population.
Yeah. And if I'm hearing everybody correctly in the audience, in the panel, excuse me, it's really about understanding the needs of the user, right? And,
yep.
and taking the time and taking the energy to really understand them, even if the device is simple, right? And that just seems to be a really critical and important element of product development. It's rooted in user needs. So no, I think that's very good. We're going to change pace just a little bit, and I want to have a quick conversation for the audience about this notion of outsourced talent versus talent in-house. And Michelle, you kind of hit on this in one of your earlier comments. I'm sure a lot of people are thinking about their product development process, their organization, and how they're going to bring their platform to market, whether that be novel or custom. And they're thinking about the resources that they need to do that, whether that be hiring, somebody who's the head of R&D, somebody who's got experience in human factors, a consulting firm, whatever it may be. And so I'd like to ask you guys, based on your experiences, just that comparison of who's internal versus who's external. I think would be really helpful for you to speak to that. And maybe some examples of like, hey, we hired this person in-house and they were amazing, but we had this firm who was external and they brought outside of the box thinking that we wouldn't have had internally. And so because of that, that was a really valuable partner too. And maybe Valerie, let's start with you.
So I think you have to have someone internal who's the champion, someone who really believes in the need to do whatever it is you've got in your mind to do, so without that, you're never going to succeed. It's just going to go by the wayside. And I've worked in organizations where there's a huge human factors team or a huge customer experience team, or now where I'm at, it's me and, an engineer, a couple engineers and so forth. So, we're championing something right now because we want to improve upon what we already have. So you've got to have someone who's the champion. It could be a human factors person, an industrial design person, marketing, whomever it is. So someone who really believes and pushes. I think also it's helpful to have some sort of expertise, a representative of at least one person who knows what kind of, if you're going to use an external service, what kind of firm should you contact? If you have an industrial design person in-house, they're going to know about human factors. They're going to know, excuse me, about training and things like that. Same thing, vice versa. Human factors will understand industrial design, early design research, and so forth. So having at least industrial design or human factors, someone there who understands the development process. Because ultimately, you've got to take this through design controls and take this through early feasibility work, determining, are you really going to make this new device? And then deciding, okay, we're doing this. Now we have to create the business plan for it. We have to create the quality plan, the usability plan, all the things that under design controls you have to develop and make sure that you have on board so that you can start developing the device. So I don't know if a company that doesn't have those, at least those one or two of those types of folks, the HF for the industrial design and, the R&D peers, why does the R&D person want to do this? Do they want to be first to market? Do they want to be better than the competition? Are they looking to reduce costs, marketing and so forth? So those are my thoughts. I think you've got to have someone who's qualified. They don't have to know everything, how to do all this, but they have to know who they should bring on board or who they should have on staff that can execute for you.
Oh, I think that's great insight. Michelle, how about you in your experiences?
Yeah, that was, I think Valerie hit it right on the nail on the head. Without that internal champion, your innovation is going to go nowhere, even with off the shelf, approach to combination products. I think back to when I first got into combination products with Zafgen and being a, N of 7, right? I was the only one that had the drug delivery experience. I was running CMC. And so they really wanted to push this forward, the idea of having an auto injector eventually for this group of users to make it easier for them and to make the injection quick and painless as possible. I remember going to my first, signing up for my first combination product summit, right, California somewhere, and meeting. I think her name was Susan Tiarella, maybe working for Biogen at the time, and running their usability, their human factors or regulatory group. I couldn't remember her exact background, but she was asking, so how many people do you have on your team? And I said, oh, I'm an N of 1, and she nearly, she was just like, how are you doing that all by yourself, right? But at Zafgen, we had a model whereby we had, it was a very, like I said, very few people on full time, but we had about, for every full-time employee, we had about 3 full-time consultants that worked for us. And so I was given the ability to bring on the consultants that I needed to help me get through learning what to me at the time was a new field and probably navigate some of the pitfalls that I would not have known how to navigate otherwise in getting to an IND submission. So I think there's a lot that you can do in-house with one person, as long as you have the access and the budget to bring in those experts that you need. And I'd say, right off the bat, regulatory input is vital. Regulatory communication is vital. If you do decide to do anything in-house and owning that design history file quality management systems are vital. And they must be up to standards that the FDA or your global regulatory authorities are going to expect as you go towards your IND and or IND amendments as you proceed through your program.
Oh, yeah, that's great. Thank you, Michelle. And then Dustin, I'll go to you, and I'll preface this because I know your perspective is different, right? I mean, you're coming from that service provider side, and so maybe I'll ask the question to you a little bit differently in thinking about, Valerie mentioned it, Michelle mentioned it, like having that champion, right? You have to have the champion inside the organization to drive it. You being on the consulting side, you're the one that's interfacing with that champion more times than not, right? And so in your mind, who have been some of the best champions for you? Like, what do those individuals look like? What are their backgrounds? Like, help us and the audience really understand, if they're going to be that champion inside their organization, how can they best interface with someone like you on the consulting side?
Yeah, good question. I think Valerie hit it on the nail. So you need that person on the other side, helping with the development of the product, right? So an overall product development owner with proven experience, and someone who's done this, who's been through it, has gone through this and has launched from concept all the way through FDA submission, I think is critical. So yeah, really that champion and someone who is right there with that, with Valerie and Michelle, who is that passionate and who is driving as well, from the product development side of things, I think is key. So almost verbatim what Valerie said has to happen on the other side. You need to have those people, right, that are passionate and willing to do whatever it takes. I guess I'm also coming at it from the product development side of things. So a couple other things that I think are really helpful to have is a good IP team, right? So intellectual property. So someone and people who you can go to help navigate existing IP and freedom to operate, who can help with the recommendations early on to establish, like, what are your design constraints? Do you have any? Have you done a gap assessment of what IP is out there versus what you have freedom to operate to help drive some of those requirements? And then folks that are actually good at generating IP and that can work with the development team to generate IP that is good, covers you, and then helps protect you in the long run. I've seen it far too often where IP teams, I've seen really good ones and not so good, and it makes a huge difference on protecting and developing IP that helps the client. Michelle hit it on the nail. Regulatory, you really can't get anywhere if you don't have someone that can provide input on what's going to be needed for your EPRs, how are you going to get to clinical, what's your testing approach, and what's going to be your buy-off on risk and a risk-based approach. You really need that as well.
Oh, that's great.
I could go on.
Yeah.
Yeah,
no, great
I could go on for days about all the other nuances, but yeah.
Yeah, no, that's, I think that's an important question we often, get from our team. So thank you guys all for your insights on that. Before I jump into the last question here, I just want to address the audience real quick. Please feel free to submit your questions. We are going to reserve a little bit of time at the end. So if you guys have any pressing questions, please feel free to put those in the chat. I know that Sarah had sent out a note there as well. We've already had a few come in, but I do want to make sure that if you guys have them, please ask them and we'll do our best to address them. So jumping into the last question here, and I think we'll start with Valerie. This question is really kind of rooted in like innovation and creativity in this space, right? And really thinking about, differentiation and bringing a technology to market that the team is proud of, that really has a positive impact on patients, their families, and their loved ones. So I'm hoping that maybe you could take a couple minutes to share a story about how your team, did something outside of the box, thought about something a little bit differently, kind of challenged the status quo, and how that led to new innovation and perhaps how that positively impacted your career.
Sure. This is a product when I was at Amgen. It's out on the market. It's been on television, so I can talk about it. It's the new Lasta On Pro device. You may have seen commercials about it. So typically when patients who receive their chemo treatment, the chemo lowers their white blood cell count, which kind of makes them susceptible to febrile neutropenia. It's a very high fever, very dangerous. And so they're given an injection of a drug that will stimulate the white blood cell count. Okay. This has to be given approximately 27 hours after the chemo treatment. So the patient's in the chemo suite, they receive their chemo, they go home. Now they feel like hell. They've got to come back 24 hours later and get this shot. So Amgen had this drug that they decided, it was already, just on the market, the drug itself. What we did is, and this was not my idea, this was someone else's idea, but I was very instrumental in helping develop the instructions for use, the user interface, usability testing the heck out of it and so forth, making sure it works. There's a company, Insulet, that developed a insulin device that's wearable. It's worn on the arm. It's filled with insulin, and you wear it for 3 days and then you replace it. So what Amgen did is they got in contact with Insulet, and they took this insulin device and they modified it. So this would be a case of taking an off-the-shelf solution and integrating innovation into it and changing the purpose of the device. The device was then created so that it would have a 27-hour delay. So the nurse in the chemo suite takes the device, fills the reservoir of the device with this new lasted drug, and then it's an on-body device, so puts it onto the patient in the chemo suite. The patient goes home, and hopefully it's timed so that when they're sleeping, that's when the device delivers the drug. And so we worked on the device to make sure, the engineering group worked on the device to make sure the 27-hour delay was indeed accurate, that the device did deliver the full dose. On the usability side, the device already had its own lights and sounds and so forth, but they were not for the same purpose as what this device was for. This is a life-threatening, if you don't get this drug, you have a life-threatening situation. You cannot miss your dose. So we took the lights, the alarms and the sounds and so forth, the alarms and the alerts, and we modified them to make them specifically to alert the patient in the event they didn't get a full dose. And it was an interesting problem because you've got the nurse that's inserting the drug product into the device in the chemo suite. So we had to create an IFU for her and instructions for use for her or him, the healthcare provider, and then a separate instructions for use for the patient. The first time we had 2 separate instructions for use for 2 different user groups. And so then that second instructions for use was for the patient, how to operate the device, how to understand the lights and sounds, how to check as to whether or not they received their dose at the end of the 27 hours, and look to see in case they didn't, to report it immediately to their healthcare provider. So for me, it was a device that created convenience for the patient, especially when they're in a situation where they don't feel well, they can't make it back to the pharmacy or to the clinic. And there was also, with combination products, you often have an issue with payors, and then and reimbursement to the physician. So how is the physician going to get reimbursed for use of a combination product if the patient's doing all the work? So a compromise that Amgen made was, okay, we'll still have the healthcare provider fill the drug reservoir in the office. And so the physicians are still reimbursed for basically dispensing the medication, whereas the patient is tasked with administering the medication. So that device is out today. It's been extremely well accepted by patients and their families. I think it reduces the burden not only on the patient, but the caretaker who's got to take the patient back to the clinic and so forth. So to me, that was a really innovative solution for using something that exists, modifying it, solving a pretty inconvenient problem for patients and making their life a lot easier.
Yeah. Well, it sounds, what a rewarding project to be a part of, inside of a company like that, and to have that kind of impact on patients. It sounds like that was an amazing program. Michelle, how about you?
Yeah, I was just going to say, you bring up a really great point, Valerie, with the respect to the payers, because it doesn't matter how innovative, doesn't matter how great your device is, if you don't have a market for it. I think the example that comes to mind for me was the Mankind, I think, that was developed at one point. It was an inhaler that should have been phenomenal, and just never had any market uptake. So the amount of money that was spent on developing that amazing device, and it just never got off the ground. So I'd say the fun part for me for all of this in the space is, how we interact, how we get user inputs, and design your concepts, and then feed those concepts back to your users and get, down select your features that you need for your devices. And that has been the fun part of the journey for me. As far as innovation, I think probably more of my experience with innovation when it comes to not necessarily an on the market benefit, but personal challenges come in the form of scenario planning and looking and seeing what maybe taking something from another field or industry and applying it to this industry and looking at innovation that way, whether it's actually used or not. An example is for me is at iPoint we had a product called DexaQ. It was a 5 microliter injection into the eye. It's a very small dose and very hard to be precise with current technologies that are out there. And in some of our building our scenarios, we looked at using one of the gas-tight Hamilton syringes, which is a capillary syringe that can get down to very small volumes, but they're typically not used to inject things into the body. They're usually used to inject things into an HPLC. But how can we use things like that and build innovation through other segments of the industry or outside our industry into a drug product, combination product?
Yeah, you see that translation a lot right now from the consumer side of the world into healthcare, right? You got these companies like Amazon and Apple, and they have amazing consumer-facing technologies, and you start to think about how we can leverage that as a collective industry to make things more seamless for patients. But of course, when you step into our world, there's the regulatory burden associated with that, right? And it's a whole new learning curve. So it's a great point on just looking at other types of technologies and how we can bring that into the space. Dustin, how about you round us out?
Yeah, that sounds great. It actually ties all of this kind of in together, which is really, really great. So we actually developed something really cool here called the Smart Inhaler. Just regular inhalers to date, there's no information on your dosing, right? A company came to us and said, can you develop something that tracks and goes to a patient app so we can track adherence, dosage, when they take their dose, and get metrics on the dosing. So we developed a really cool smart inhaler. It's just a cap that fits on top of every inhaler that's on the market and then pairs to a phone app. So we can actually start collecting some of that data. So, is your kid actually taking, the inhaler and actually using it, and getting some of those metrics. So selfless plug, we have a lot of products and a lot of case studies and examples. So happy to discuss that further if you reach out and contact me. I know we're coming up against some time. So
yeah. Well, no, thank you, Dustin, and thank you guys for the great answers. Sarah, if you wouldn't mind just putting the conclusion slide up with our information here. So first off, I just want to say thank you all to the audience. I know we're 1 after the hour here, and it still looks like we have folks here, which is great to me. It means that this was a valuable discussion and that you guys saw the value in seeing all the way through. So again, thank you for your time. And again, I want to thank the panelists, Valerie, Michelle, and Dustin, all of them who took the time today to share some of their insights. and their experiences in this space that we're also passionate about. So thank you guys. Feel free to reach out to any of us. Our emails are here below if you guys have questions. We did have a couple pointed questions that we'll get back to those individuals independently, but no broader questions for the panel today, which is great because we're right at time. So again, thank you all so much for the time, and looking forward to staying in touch with all of you.
Great. Thanks very much, everyone. Thanks for all of those, that insightful discussion. And thanks to all of our audience members for participating in today's webinar. You'll be receiving a follow-up email from X-Talks with access to the recorded archive for this event. And a survey window will be popping up on your screen. Your participation is appreciated as it will help us to improve our webinars. Now, I'm just about to send a link to you all through that chat box there. This is where you'll be able to view the recording of this event, and you can also share this link with your colleagues when they register for the recording here as well. They'll be able to view it. Definitely encourage you to do that. Now, please join us in thanking all of our speakers for today: Brandon Bogdalek, Michelle Howard-Sparks, Valerie Fenster, and Dustin Guidas. Thanks everyone for joining. We hope you found this conference informative, and have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.